Are you looking for a great gift idea, or maybe just want to make another sellable item for your inventory? A tooled knife sheath is a great option for you. And in this video, I'm going to show you start to finish how to build one of these tooled knife sheaths. We're going to do it a little bit different as far as the tooling goes. I want to use a pattern from our new pattern pack, because that comes with 4 patterns, but some of these are customizable. We leave an opening in there to where we can put initials or brands, which again makes a great gift, makes a good option to have in your store there as well. But these are going to fit most trapper knives, different folding knives. They're not made for a fixed blade knife. I'm going to show you why as we do the construction of this, and tell you what you need to do different if you do want to make a sheath for a fixed blade knife. So let's jump over and get started. So we're going to be starting with the knife sheath blank pack that we offer. Biggest thing about these, they're made from Herman oak leather, which is the highest quality of veg tan leather that we're going to get, especially for tooling. And what comes in that pack is 2 pieces, right? We're 2 sides to this, so they're going to go together like that to make our sheath. And we either have a right hand carry or a left hand carry, depending on which side of the belt you're going to want this to be worn on. That's going to make the outside of our tooling piece. So we need to know which side that we're going to be tooling on. And when we look at our patterns, we're going to use the knife sheath pattern pack. These are the patterns that actually come in that pack. This is obviously them tooled up, so you get to see these here. But we have a couple different full tool options. Again, a left hip, a right hip, or you can mirror image these and use them on the other side as well. But what's really neat about this pack is these 2 patterns here that are added in. They have a little bit of tooling, but some open space in here. This is going to allow us to add initials or brands and things and customize these patterns, yet still have some tooling in there. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to dive into this pattern here because these little stumps seem to throw people off a bit and can be challenging on where to put your shading at. So we're going to go ahead and tool those ones up today. And I already have that pattern piece right here. So first step is we're going to prep our piece that we're going to be tooling. This is going to be our back piece, so I'm not going to worry about that one. But this one here, we're going to prep by taping the back of this and taping our pattern front and back, and then getting that cut out and ready to go. So the first step to tooling this up, once we're taped on the back there, is going to be to case that or wet it down. And I'm just going to do that with a sponge and some water here. Doesn't take a whole lot, but I'm just watching to see how quick that water's absorbing. See how that's starting to take a second to absorb, and that's what we're after. What that's doing is telling me that that water's actually soaking down in the leather. If it's just barely wetting the surface, we're not actually going to get the same color out of our tooling that we want, not that depth. So that's why we want to make sure that's down in there. Now I can lay this pattern right over top, and using my stylus, we're going to transfer that pattern. That's just simply pushing down, tracing over those lines. I'm not worried about tracing my stitch lines or anything like that. Just kind of on there for reference to show. Make sure we're lined up all the way out to that edge, so we got plenty of room for our stitch line out there. Now today when I'm tooling, I'm just going to be using our beginner deluxe tooling set. So nothing fancy with the tools, just good solid tools that are going to work for us. Now once that's transferred, we're gonna go to our swivel knife. Now, with my swivel knife, the direction I'm pulling these cuts, if you look at this little guy kind of growing out this way, out at those points, that's where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start those cuts there. That way, when I'm pulling that towards me, I can begin to fade that cut off. Now, when I talk about fade, I'm just talking about releasing pressure so it fades out to nothing. And if you're a little off your transfer line, like I was right there, I'm not worried about that. I'd rather have a nice smooth cut and be just a skosh off that transfer line. Remember, those transfers are just guidelines. Draw this cut down. And you notice I'm turning my knife, I'm moving my hand, and even turning that leather a little bit. There's no rules against it as long as we're getting those nice smooth cuts. Okay, I'll come down to this side and do the same thing. Nice cut. Now occasionally on these knives we're going to do what's called stropping them, and that's, I got a chunk of leather with some jeweler's rouge, which is a buffing compound you can get at the hardware store. And I'm just going to strop that knife, and what that's doing is polishing the blade, cleaning up any of the impurities or little rough spots on that knife. That way we continue to get nice smooth cuts through here. Helps that knife glide right along through the leather. Being careful not to tip that knife too far left or right, because I don't want to create an undercut and a little lip that can pick up. Now this little guy here, I'm just going kind of light at the ends, because this is that fold up of that stump there, just that edge folded up. Now we can put our knife away and get our bevels out. First bevel I'm going to get is the large bevel. You can just see it's a little wider across here than the small one. But this I'm going to be holding straight up and down. I'm not tipping forward or back. Every time I strike that tool, I'm going to move it, but I'm just barely moving it. By just barely moving it, that's what's going to allow us to get that nice smooth bevel line around here. That's what we want, is that smooth bevel. We don't want to get the rough chatter marks in there. As we come into tighter places, I can tip left to right a little bit, and that's going to shorten that bevel and make it get around there easier. Or our other option is going to be to size down. If I grab my small bevel, it's just a little bit narrower here. This one will work really well inside these curves. So on the inside of this curve here, that works super good. Same thing, I'm just barely moving it along as we come around that curve. But then around this tight outside curve, that works nice as well. So you don't have too much bevel sticking out the side and wanting to chew up that leather where you're not wanting it beveled. So we're going to keep this small one in my hand and come around these smaller curves before I switch back to my larger bevel. Because this large bevel will work good on those outside edges. Now, can I use this small bevel on the large lines, on those big long lines as well? Absolutely. But I'll show you when we switch back to the large one why it makes a difference and why it's easier to run the larger bevel on the longer lines. Because you'll notice this one, I'm still just barely moving this bevel along. Every time I strike it down, it's barely moving. I'm just moving a fraction of it, not half a bevel or not a full bevel, not even a quarter bevel really. It's just a little bit of it that's stepping up and moving each time around there. This on this fold over, I'm going to start in real light on that end. Then we can strike that tool a little bit more, get a little heavier bevel in that center. And then I'm going to lighten my taps and fade that back out on this end as well. Notice those lines fade out right in line with the larger line out there. They're not ending perpendicular and running into that line. They're going to end almost parallel out there on the ends. So now switching back to this large one, why is it that this is better on the long lines? If I'm still just barely moving that bevel, what difference does it make? Well, if I'm moving this along just a little bit, then there's all that rest of that bevel that's re-beveling what I just went over. So it's helping to smooth that line up even as I walk around there. So if we can be patient and just move it a little bit at a time, that's going to allow you to just bevel that one time rather than creating a bunch of choppy marks and lines and gouges that you have to go back over and re-bevel to try to smooth up. Come down here, we got 2 more lines to bevel. Hit that outside one where it just kind of comes down to that point there at the bottom. Another thing, notice how low I'm holding that tool. I have control all the way down that tool and then contact all the way up the side, so that tool's not wanting to wiggle on me. I keep good solid control and know right where that's hitting. I have my fingers down here anchored on the leather, help give added control as well. Okay. Now this line here will bevel out. Now this is one of those that ends within the vine work, so we faded it out with our knife. We're going to really fade this out when I bevel it as well. Just like with the knife, we release pressure to fade. I'm going to add less pressure and just hit a lot softer as we come down to the end of this. We're right there at the end. I'm just almost barely just pushing that tool down with my hand and not even hitting them all. Now that's beveled up, ready for some shading. So the tool I like to use for the shading is this vertical line thumbprint. It's gonna work. I'm always gonna be tipping this tool. The bevel I was holding straight up and down, this tool's gonna tip. And I want my deep dark shading around that rounded side of this little sticker vine here. So I'm tipping this around, really squeezing that tool with my fingers. You can see how white my finger is right there. It's because I'm squeezing this tool so I can hold it really steady and almost draw this little highlighted ridge around there as I'm tapping that tool. And then by having it tipped, it allows that shading to fade off down that vine. We got a little sticker on the inside here. Same thing. The rounded spot is where we'll put that dark shading, and that fades off as it comes down the vine and fades off when you come in towards this concave line on the inside. So now this big spot in the middle, what the heck are we going to do? We're going to put just a little light shading on this outside edge. So I'm tipping this tool, barely tapping that. Working my way down here. Notice where that tool's pointing. It's pointing back down the vine. Now whether you're using the narrow end or the wide end, it's whatever end just kind of fits well with where you're at. They both work good. Smooth that out. I can work back up the vine. I can work down here. Just keeping that tipped enough where the back of the tool is not gouging in the leather as well. Now in here, I have a rounded part of this and then concave. So we're going to concentrate that shading on the rounded edge, and then I'm going to fade it off as we come to the concave, or that inside curve. A little deeper shading there on the rounded spot. And then we'll lighten it up as we come towards the concave curve there. Now, why is that? What does that do for us? What that helps is to help create this ridge down the middle of that stump, and helps create some depth and dimension to that as it's coming in there. And then we have this nice open area that we'll use for decorative cuts. We don't want to mash a bunch of shading all the way down in there. So this guy on this end, little shading on that rounded part there. Same thing, we got some rounded curves that we'll put shading in. Slack off on the concave spots. Help create that dimension. And now where this is folded up and over, we're going to run some shading right underneath this edge, keeping the angle of my tool pointing back down our vine here. See how that's softening that line and letting that shadow stretch out down from there. Now I'm going to come on this little lip that folds up over there. I'm just going to put just a little shading right on that edge of it, just to help give that a little texture and a little dimension. Right on the edge of that little fold there. So now we got some shading and some life added to this. We can hit with a few detail tools. One detail tool that works real good in here is the mule's foot. It's the little tool, looks kind of like a V in here with a point on it. I'm going to put that point right at the edge of where these sticker vines come in, and pointing back down the vine. So the open part of the V is up towards me right now. See that where I hit that one time and it helps create that wrinkle in there. And now I'm going to step down and stack a couple more below it, but fading them off. Keeping them close together. I'm also trying to follow that curve around a little bit. Okay, our last detail tool on this is back to our swivel knife for our decorative cuts. On these, we're going to put out in the sticker vine portion of the stump. We'll put a short cut up there next to the short rounded line, and then we'll come and follow a longer cut down here. Really fading those cuts out. That's what's helping to add some flow and some dimension to our pattern here. Okay, now right in the middle of this, we said we had that big open spot that we can use. So we're gonna pull a long line down here, and then this little swoopty line out on the end of that stump. I'm gonna follow that same kind of pattern with a little decorative cut in here. Fade that out. Now there's lots of ways you can do your decorative cuts. This is just one example of them. This one here, we're gonna pull a short line, a longer one. I'm gonna add just a couple little cuts in that fold over piece, give that a little dimension. Now, this one here, I'm going to start actually pointing back up towards this side, and then we'll wrap that back around. So then I can pull a curve, stack a few of those lighter cuts. Just helps give that little bit of flow in there. So now with this, we have an open spot here. If you had initials or brands that you wanted to stamp or carve in there, you can do that right there in the center. This particular one, we're gonna leave open, so we have here in the storefront, and we'll be able to put a brand in there later. We'll actually use a hot iron brand and brand that in later on for somebody. So we can move this over to the construction stage now that the tooling's done, and I guess the finish stage more so than the construction yet. We're going to take the tape off the back. And we have that tape on there so it didn't stretch and distort on us. But we'll take this over and we're going to start by putting a coat of oil on there and then letting that sit and dry. Okay, the first step on the finish, like I said, is the oil. And we use 100% pure neat's foot oil. And this is going to help rehydrate that leather a little bit through the tanning process and through our tooling, wetting down and drying out. It takes a lot of moisture away from that leather. So we want to put that back in. It's going to help for the longevity of your products here. Back, I did go ahead and put my maker's mark in the back of that knife sheath as well. But we'll get these oiled up and then let those sit and then let that soak that oil in for a bit. And we're going to do a antique finish on this one, but we're going to do a non-resisted antique finish, and it's going to help darken that natural color in there and give that a little bit of a faster patina to it. So let that sit and then come back with that antique here in a little bit. All right, that oil's soaked in pretty good, so it's ready to go, and I changed my mind. I said I was going to antique it, we're not. I'm going to show you something different here. This is Duff's leather dressing, so we're just going to put a layer of this on here. I got a little scrap of sheepskin I keep in there, but this is going to be kind of just a one-step deal. We'll put this finish on here, and then it'll dry in there, and we'll be ready for construction on this. It's going to give it a nice look, not quite as dark as the antique will, just a little different look to it, but I'm going to do that on the front and the back as well, so this thing matches up. And this is going to, again, also help condition a little bit, and then put the finish on there. So a little more of a all-in-one type of product, not something you would use as a resist or in place of a resist or with one at all. It's its own deal that we'll put on there. We got quite a bit on that, so we'll just rub the extra off. We'll let that sit and then talk a little bit while that's soaking in on our construction here. I'd mentioned earlier this is for a trapper knife or a folding knife, not for a fixed blade. You know, fixed blade being that solid knife with the blade always exposed. Well, we're going to be putting this together right like that, these two pieces, and then stitching. If you use a fixed blade knife and you shove a fixed blade knife in there, you will cut through your stitches. So any knife sheath that's for the fixed blade, you'll put what's called a welt in there. We would put another piece of leather in between there that would protect your stitches from your blade. But this being the pancake sheath style for that trapper, all we're going to worry about is putting this together and stitching it. Now, where do we want to stitch it at? We have those marked on the patterns here as well. This is the different tooling pattern, but it has the same stitch marks on it. You can see we're going to go up and around this belt hole, down, around, and back around the other belt hole. That way those holes are nice and secure, running that belt in and out, but we have left that opening at the top so we can actually fit a knife in there. Don't get in the habit of just sewing around something and sew that shut. That's a frustrating day right there. But where are we going to glue at then? Also, we don't want to just glue this whole piece together, frustrating day when you don't have an actual pocket in there. So we're gonna just use nice control with our glue, and we're gonna glue out around this edge, and we don't have to glue in very far. We're just looking to glue maybe 3/8 or so. Just kind of give you a little rough idea there. And then we'll glue a little bit on the inside of those holes as well. So I'm also going to show you a different glue than we typically use. A lot of times you'll see me use barge contact cement, but this is this Aquilum 315 from Renya, and this stuff here, another contact cement. This one is a water base. I think it's a water base. I could be speaking out of turn. Yes, the water-based adhesive. So it's not going to have the same smell either. So if you're real against the smell of barge, then you can use this stuff. But it works kind of the same way as far as the contact cement goes. But I do like the control that we have over it. So putting it on with this little spatula thing here, it makes for really good control. I'm not worried about over gluing, which is why I like it for instances like this. And it goes on, you got that kind of milky white color. But what we're looking for, just like how the barge is, or any contact cement, you want each side to tack up a little bit before you put it together. This is the same way. We're gonna glue this side, and then I'm gonna come to the other side and glue this as well. And what I'll be looking for is that milky color to go away. And so as it turns clear, that tells me that it's going to be ready to put together. You can see it gets ready pretty quick. It doesn't take long to soak that in because you just put a thin layer of this stuff on. It doesn't take a very thick amount on there. Putting too much actually probably would work against you. I'll get that closed up so it doesn't dry out on me. And then the little extra that's on the spatula, I just let that dry and then it peels right off of that. Works pretty well that way. So now you can see where this is kind of dried clear. You're not seeing that milky. You're seeing a little bit there where it was thicker. A little bit where I'd been thick on that one. That one's dried as well. So now we can put these together. When I do that, I'm kind of using the edge of my fingers right on the edges there to line that up good. Make sure that top of that pocket's lined up good as well. I'm also looking inside these belt holes, lining those up really good. The outside, if I'm a little off one way or the other, we can clean that up when we sand and edge these. Those inside holes, without a Dremel, they're a little harder to clean up, so I'd just as soon get those pretty perfect as I first put that down. I like to say perfect's close enough. So, and a lot of times I'll break that rule too, but that's okay. Okay, now we can get that pushed and sealed around there. All right, we'll let this dry just a little bit longer. The finish that we have on the top, that Duff's dressing. The reason I want to do that before I go to stitching is just to reduce the amount of machine tracks I get on this, because I'm going to sew this on my machine. If you're hand stitching, heck, have at it and go right for stitching. But if you're sewing on a machine, the drier we can get this piece before we stitch on it, the better, the less you're gonna have to fight tracks from your presser foot on there. But when we do go to stitch that, knowing where we stitch is the important thing. So again, we're gonna stitch along our inside here. We'll come up around and we'll stitch all the way around our outside edge. Come up around here. And then we'll finish that stitch off right down next to the inside of this belt hole here. And again, I'll back stitch when I start that, come around and we'll back stitch here. So we'll get that all stitched up and then come back for the last part of finishing these edges off. Now that we got that stitching done, the next thing we want to look at is these edges. So we don't want to leave that raw edge there. If there's any unevenness or any glue exposed, anything like that, first thing I'm going to do is sand it down. So I'm going to use 120 grit sandpaper to start with here. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but just a rougher sandpaper to start with. This is going to be a little more aggressive and help us get that edge down to where they're even on here. Now if you have a sanding wheel, you know, mechanical sander, you can run it on there as well. But I just wanted to show you how by stepping these grits down, we can do this by hand fairly quick. It doesn't take too long. Just a little elbow grease in here, but see, we're already starting to get that nice even edge there. The better job you do gluing that together, the easier you're gonna have sanding it. And the same thing, the better job we do sanding, the easier a job is gonna be when we go to slick this. Come around. Once I make my way around with this lower grit, this 120, that's going to be the little bit coarser of a sandpaper, right? So it's more aggressive. We're taking a lot more leather off of that. It's also going to be able to grab, again, any of that glue there at all. But once we get around with that, now I'm going to change sandpaper. So that was a 120. Now I'm going to go to a 320. And these just happen to be the numbers of sandpaper I have in the shop. Again, you don't have to be exactly these numbers, but it gives you the idea of stepping up in these grits here. Now as I come around to this one, I'm going to start just rounding that corner and getting the edge on the corner too. The first one, the main thing was getting both pieces even. Now we're starting to really smooth this out. Again, getting just around that rounded corner here. Tip this over just so I can come over with my thumb and catch that back corner on there too. Start rounding that up just a little bit. Okay, now this is already feeling really, really good. But we're going to go one step further with it. I'm going to jump up. I do take quite a bit of a jump up from the from the 320 here. And we're going to go clear up to 1,000 grit. This is going to just really help fine tune Get that nice, slick, smooth edge. This is almost polishing that edge even without any compound on it yet. Okay, I made my way around with that. We're gonna use, today I'm gonna use Martin's mix, so I shake that up good. Load that pin up there. I'm just gonna come right around the edge of that. Making sure we get a good coat on here. With it already smoothed off good with that sandpaper, it's not going to take much to slick this up. Again, it doesn't matter which compound you're using or solution that you're using, whether it's Martin's mix or gum trag or toconol or glycerin and water or wax, any of them. The prep work you put into your edge, I think, makes a whole lot more of a difference than the solution itself. So the solution does make it really nice, but just know that the prep work you put into your edge is going to make a lot bigger difference. So now we're coming back with a scrap of canvas here. Now this is your last little bit of elbow grease that's going to come in and start getting that nice shine, really good burnish. That darker color that I'm getting on that edge there is that nice burnish that we're getting on there. It's coming from the friction that I'm putting in with that canvas against the solution that's filling in any of the edge on that leather. Sometimes what's nice is to be able to hang this off the edge of the table too. So I'm going to show you that. I'm just going to back the camera up here. There you go. Hopefully that doesn't make you too sick there, but leaving that off the edge, now I can get good leverage on the edge of that. Work around there. If you need to add more solution, we can run that across there. This is going to make for a really nice finished feel to your product as well. So people that don't do leather work, they might not understand what all goes into this, but if you hand them two products, one with a finished edge and one without, they'll, even not knowing what it is, they'll notice there's a difference, and one's going to feel a little bit more of a high-end product to them, and they're going to pick the one with the finished edge. So get that nice feel to that. Now again, edges or something, as much time and effort you want to put into them, you can. If you want to come back with that 1000 grit again, or step up to a higher grit, boy, this will just really put that last little bit on there. That with that solution one last time here. And then again, a light buff over this. One more pass with that canvas. Gives a really nice finish. Right there. Slick, glass-like edge on that. That's what we're after. When you got your edges done, if you're wanting to wet form this so you can actually fit your knife in a little bit easier and make sure it custom fits, open that up a little bit with your finger in there. And I like just dropping some water right down in there. Get the inside of that wet down a little bit. That's gonna help you when you form that knife, is just by wetting the inside. You don't have to try to sop through whatever finish you put on there. The inside doesn't have a finish, so it will absorb water from the inside. And that's gonna help you form that knife. And then let that knife be in there as it dries. I hope you have a ton of fun with this. We're gonna link up down below if you want a material pack so you don't have to try to cut this all out. You save time with that material pack. If you just are after the patterns and do want to cut them out, we'll link up the pattern pack. If you want just that pattern that we tooled up on this and want to try it out on your own patterns, then jump over to the Leather Life community. We'll link that in the description and we'll get that posted up there in the pattern so you can get just that one if you want. Otherwise, that's all included in the pattern pack where you get all 4 of those tooling patterns. So I appreciate you letting me be on your Leathercraft journey. Can't wait to see you on the next video.